Leave it all behind. This is the focus group.
They're all business, except when they're not. It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Focus Group. Tim Bennett here, as always, with my good friend and co-host, Mr. John T. Nash. Hello, Mr. Nash.
Mr. Bennett.
In our 16th year here on the Focus Group, we mentioned earlier this week on our show, TFG Unbuttoned, our podcast, which comes out on Tuesdays, that OutQ this past week celebrated, or would have celebrated, 21 years since its founding. And John and I were talking about how time flies. But, of course, we've been doing this for 16 years. And how many episodes do we have that you can download at focusgroupradio.com? Are there 900 maybe? I don't know.
Well, the Sirius episodes are obviously from Sirius XM days, and you can't download those.
Can't touch them.
Basically, Tim, it's like 50 times the last 7 years or so, right?
Yes, 57. So 400.
300 or 400, yeah.
Yeah. So you can find those at focusgroupradio.com. You'll also find our podcast there, TFG Unbuttoned, along with our sponsors, including Deep Discount, which has been a partner of ours here for quite some time, and we'll be talking about them later on in the show. Mr. Nash, how was your week, or your beginning of week, or we're midweek?
Week is good. I'm glad for the milder weather. I think we talked about this a little bit on Unbuttoned. I get out more on my bike, which is very different than when you train indoors. Like on an indoor trainer, I could sit for maybe an hour. That's about it. I'm watching video or something.
Did you do that a lot this winter?
I do. In fact, the training that I use is called System, SYSTM, or System by Wahoo. They make the trainer the bike's hooked up to. Right. It's a resistance thing. So it simulates going up and down hills by changing the resistance on the bike. And I watch these videos called On Location. And so you're basically, the camera's point of view is you're behind a pro rider. In this case, it's a guy named Mike Cotty, who's really nice. And he takes you through Girona, the Catalonia, you'll be in the Provence area of France. And these are structured rides. They're 54 minutes, an hour and a half, 40. And there's a lot of variation, and you get off a sweaty mess, your heart's racing. It's not quite what you would do in the real world. And I always think it preps me for the real world. And I probably, maintain my fitness levels doing this, but then I'll get outside for a real ride and go on a real hill.
Well, in some ways it's harder because you're constantly moving. I know this is the same with rowing. It's because if you are, particularly with the bike, right, you work hard getting up the hill, but then going down, you're not necessarily pedaling, right? But on these sort of apps or these sort of programs, you're constantly moving.
Well, when you trained for rowing, you used the erg, right?
Yeah, which to me I felt was harder than the actual boat. But yeah, no, I hated indoor training. But it was I hated that, and I hated running, which I had no idea rowing involves so much running, and running stairs, which is why I've got bad knees. Nobody told me any of this when I was 18, 19, 20, 21. So I'm not happy about it.
And you did it with gusto, and you did it well. I don't mind indoor. Like one day I was doing an indoor ride. It was an hour and a half. I think it was along the Costa Brava in Spain. And I had the fan on so that, as you get hot, you don't get too hot. And I looked out the window, it was snowing. And so I'm on the video in front of me on my iPad's this beautiful sunny blue sky with the Mediterranean on the right and the rider in front of you. And there's no music. You just hear the sounds of cars or the wind.
It's a good day for taking the blues. It's a good day.
Complete non sequitur. And I know I'm going to be banging on this for a little while yet. But remember we did the brownie thing a while ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I bought a box of Pillsbury, John, but I didn't have all the ingredients. I want to do it correctly.
It's an egg and vegetable oil, right? And I think
it's tough here in Rehoboth.
Okay.
It's like third world Poland off season to try to find something.
I had settled on Pillsbury as my favorite.
Right, that's what you told me.
But we have a listener. Was it Allison?
Renee in Lancaster. Who, by the way, wants to come on and talk. I don't know if you followed this. I'll do another sequitur sidebar. She was in charge of doing the Drag Queen Story Hour at the library, and Lancaster County, and they had bomb threats and it's picketing, and it's turned into a huge disaster. It's all over the news. I felt sorry for her, but she had contacted us about it. So I thought maybe we'd have her come on and talk about her experience.
I would love to have her on just from that perspective alone. Like, how do you put on something that you know the kids are going to love, that's not going to hurt them, and yet everybody else thinks is... So
I'll ask her.
She landed on the Duncan Hines mix as her favorite. Right. So I was trying to figure this out. So I've done it twice now, and the first batch I did in a 9x13 pan. It's the Duncan Hines dark chocolate brownie mix. It was on sale for $1.42. Okay, so that's the reason I want to nail this brownie thing, because if you go to like a bakery and you buy a brownie, you're spending like $4 or $5, right?
Oh yeah.
The mix alone at $1.42 means you could buy, make a tray. So this time, this past week, I made that same mix again, but this time I did it in a glass pan that was slightly smaller. It was probably 8x11 or something. So it wasn't the 9x13. Right. And I was really careful about baking, because I remember she said something to you about watching the baking times. So at 30 minutes, I did the toothpick test, and I did another 3 minutes. And I kept inching it up until I got the perfect. They came out fantastic. I think that I want to say it's a different taste, more subtle than the Pillsbury a little bit. So it could be that they're edging out Pillsbury, and they may be my new favorites.
Well, then did you try Betty Crocker too?
Not yet, no.
See, I think this is one of these where you need to bake them all and then do a taste test with Bob or your friends up there. One by one. Yeah. Well, you bake them all on a Saturday or Sunday or something, or during the week, and then you have them there, and only you know, or if Bob makes them, only he knows. Probably you're going to make them. And then do the taste test and say, okay, which one do you like? Yeah. And see where it lands.
And by the way, he is critical. Extremely critical. In fact, I make him do the toothpick test now. So one time I did the brownies, and I just took them out, did the thing. I think seemed fine. Later on, he's like, they're a little underbaked.
Oh, thanks, Bob.
Yeah. So now when I take them out, I'm like, can you please? You know how to do it. I'm like, no, I want you to have a hand in this, so that by the time they're truly done, they're underbaked. Yeah.
Eat around it.
Oh, he had no problem eating the underbaked brownies, but every time there was a look on his face like, these could be so much cakier or so much nicer than these flat.
Which brownies I loved, and you're going to laugh at me. So when we were in elementary school, and you probably had this in Middlebury at your school, there was a brownie that came. It was a little square brownie, had a yellow label, and they also did those chocolate chip cookies.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Choco chip, I guess is what they were called. But whatever that little fudge brownie was, there was a little independent grocery store called O'Neill's in Glenside, PA, that would sell them. And every once in a while I would buy them, and they still taste so darn good. But they were dense, almost like fudge, but it was definitely cake, like hard cake, dense brownie. I used to love those in when I was a little elementary school, but you don't see them much.
I'm surprised by that, because you're not a big chocolate fan.
I'm not, but I would see those cookies. Costco was selling them in bulk for a while, and I had to stop because I would buy them. You could buy them for $1 something at the store, or in bulk. Costco was selling 24 for like $7.99. I'm thinking, what a deal! And but then they would get eaten too quick. They got a salty taste to them, a salty cookie, chocolate chip cookie. Now I'm hungry.
Now, do you know another food item that, and I know, sorry listeners, but we know you're getting a kick out of it. Those, I think Richard likes them, those pretzel crisps?
Yes.
They're the
just the shell.
It's the flattened pretzel, right?
Yeah.
They are now a stock item. If Bob doesn't have pretzel crisp in the cabinet, and I'll tell you, I'll open the bag and I'll have 2 of these. But 2 turns to 4, turns to 6, turns to 8. And finally, the other day, I bought a bag of pretzel twists that are unsalted.
Oh.
Well, here you go. So I'll have like maybe 3 unsalted pretzels, call it a day. They're tiny. They're the mini twists. It's the salt. It's salt and sugar. We know this. We've been told this. It's the salt and the sugar that keeps you coming back for more. So if you have unsalted, like what I'll do now is I'll have an unsalted pretzel mini, and I'll put a tiny little piece of unsalted peanut butter on it. It's actually kind of tasty, but you only want 1 or 2 of them, and then you're fine. But it's the other stuff that keeps you like popcorn at a movie theater. Right?
Well, it's funny you say that, because we talked about matzo, and was one of our business birthdays, the matzo. And so I was at the grocery store, and they had a box of it, buy one get one free. It was $5.73 for this Manischewitz matzah.
New packaging.
But new packaging. But I said, but I don't really want to buy two because you and I were talking about we're going to have it with butter like we used to as little kids. But I picked the thing up. It was like picking up a cement brick. I mean, it was so heavy. And I thought, what am I going to do with two of these? Build a wall or something. I mean, they were so heavy. Did you ever try? Maybe it was just this huge. I thought, did they not just have one little box? I don't need this huge. I mean, it was enormous, this box. It was so heavy. It had to be 10 pounds. It felt like it was.
The only box I've ever known was sort of, they were thin. Maybe they had 10 matzahs in it.
Oh my God. This must have been the bulk, matzah bulk. It was too much. So I'm trying to find a smaller box as we head to Passover. So let's see. So, hey, on our show today, we've got Caught My Eye, and then we visit with our friends at Deep Discount. We have our business birthday as usual. And then we have a little shop talk, which this week is about two people that decided to leave it all behind, as we teased in the opening, and became digital nomads. And I'll be curious to see what you think about that, Mr. Nash. But without further ado, what caught your eye this week?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
I don't know if this one is a caveat emptor or if it's an AI fail. I'll let you decide when you see the image, but it concerns a sign that was put up in Detroit to welcome people for the NFL draft. And what the city council or the politicians promised was a Hollywood-style sign that says Detroit. So if you happen to be watching on YouTube, I have a picture of the AI-generated image, which has these big, brashy letters that say Detroit, like it looks like the Hollywood sign. And then behind it is a picture of what they got. Do you see that, Tim?
I saw this and I thought this was a joke. I'm glad you're doing this. So this was real.
This is absolutely real. So Michigan residents took to social media last week to express outrage, disappointment, and zingers over a pricey glamour project installed in honor of Detroit hosting the upcoming NFL draft. Folks felt they were promised a grand Hollywood-style sign overlooking Detroit's busiest freeway. What they got were 8-foot-tall green letters on 2-foot-tall cement pedestals in the southwest of the city. But this writer says, however, residents really only have themselves to blame for their disappointment after falling for an AI-generated image that never could have worked in real life. This sign, by the way, cost $400,000, or it was part of a larger beautification thing, but I can see where the disappointment comes in. I mean, if you're thinking you're going to get Hollywood, those big, tall letters, and you get Detroit.
Well, when you look at the picture, and if you're watching, we've got it on our video there, but the one that looks like the Hollywood sign with the white letters looks magnificent. But if you look at it to scale of the cars and the building behind it, they'd have to be 30 stories tall, these letters. I mean, it's enormous, right? Doesn't it look like it's 30 stories? The Rent Center is, it's almost dwarfing the Rent Center. But I laughed because the other one is just pathetic. It doesn't even pop. At least the other one pops. But I don't know why they could not have done a better version of the AI generated one with thicker letters and whiter and a brighter or white color.
And what Tim's referring to is the actual real sign, the 8-foot tall letters on. They're in this kind of a tealy blue thing. I think white would have been better. Maybe they light up. I don't know, but
no, it certainly is not what. It's not Hollywood.
No, it's not what. Tim, you probably saw this because I got this out of Jalopnik.
Okay, that's probably where I did see it.
That's a blog. It's an auto fan blog. But the actual sign was installed along I-94 in southwest Detroit, fairly close to where trucks cross the Ambassador Bridge into and out of Canada. The 10-foot green letters are fine, this writer says. We probably could have put that $400,000 to better use, but it's certainly not the worst thing to ever happen in this city, not by a long shot. He does make reference to other projects that went south of they didn't turn out the way they wanted to. And one of them was the streetcar project. And you and I have firsthand experience with this because we went to Detroit Pride years ago, remember?
Mm-hmm. In the monorail.
And there was supposed to be, they had the one streetcar that went, I think, maybe up and down that one street. That was supposed to be citywide, though, but they never completed it beyond that one thing that took you down to the river park, right?
Well, you need people to ride it.
Yeah, so that's what caught my eye. It's the disconnect between someone tapping into like DALL-E 3 or Chat GPT. Please construct a sign that says Detroit in the style of the Hollywood sign, right? And then let's show everybody that this is what you think you're getting, right?
Well, I'm glad you picked it because it's perfect. I love that stuff. Of course, me having a position in city council and getting dinged on everything we do, I'm ashamed of myself every day for decisions I make. So there we go.
I'm ashamed. Are you
Yeah,
serious?
that's what we get told. Oh, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Every meeting, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Oh, I'm ashamed. I'm shameful.
And let's just recap, folks, that the position that Tim holds is a voluntary one. There is no monetary compensation.
but I should be
Except
ashamed of
maybe you get a
myself
free
every
ice
day.
cream. Do you
I
get
don't
like
even
free
think
ice cream?
There's nothing
or
free,
cookies?
John.
No? Okay.
Nothing free. I get a bottle of water, and then I get yelled at for using a not having a recyclable thing. Anyway,
Container, yeah.
yeah. So my story was, this has popped up. Sherwin Williams, who is the paint maker, multi-billion-dollar paint conglomerate.
Mm-hmm.
The headline was, "Why Sherwin Williams is marketing its least popular color." So they said usually every year Sherwin Williams will promote the color of the year, and they highlight whatever the most trendy hues are. And kind of ironically, I guess it's ironic, Richard and I picked this color that you can see in this room if you're watching, called peppercorn, that we had painted. And all of a sudden, the following year, it became the color of the year. And now we see it everywhere. So we're trying to figure out what we're going to do next, since everybody seems to have this dark gray now.
But Tim, I often see this on exteriors.
What's
Am I
that?
wrong? Like a lot of people use the peppercorn color on an exterior.
Yeah, they'll do exterior. We did it in the kitchen, and I like it in the kitchen. This room might be a tad dark, but I like a darker room. But that's for another show. So what?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what Sherwin Williams did is they thought, let's find out what our least popular color is, which surprised me because usually if something doesn't sell in a corporate, usually discontinue it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they looked over the last 15 years. They found that Kingdom Gold was the most overlooked and least selling color in their portfolio. It's a deep yellow color with green undertones. It's their least popular color. And they said, well, millions of gallons of other colors are sold every year, including their number one selling paint, which is it's all natural colored hues, but their number one selling paint is a shade of gray this year, and their number one selling all time is a creamy white. So creamy white's all time number one seller. The most popular hues right now are this kind of shade of gray, a light shade of gray. But they said this particular color, Kingdom Gold, in the last 14 years has only sold 11,000 gallons.
Well, and compared to millions of gallons.
Compared to
11,
millions of
000.
gallons, right?
Wow, that's
but
a
they've
big
kept
change.
They kept the color around. So the woman who's head of marketing there, director of color marketing, named Sue Wadden, she decided that they were going to do something about. They were going to do this campaign around the loneliest colors. So she hooked up with this Harlem designer named Dapper Dan, and they are designing. It's a fashion designer based in Harlem, as I said, and he's doing a series of 8 wearable art pieces that they're going to auction off on eBay, all made in this Kingdom of Gold, this gold color. And then the monies that they raise for this are all going to donate to Habitat for Humanity. And her whole thing, or the whole direction of this of color, is that, and particularly her job as marketing of color, she says that for far too long now, people seem to be afraid of color. She blames it on what's going on culturally. People have too much stress in their lives, and they just don't want to make a lot of decisions. Should I paint it blue? Should I paint it gray? Or not gray? Should I paint it green or something else other than kind of the white or gray tones? And so she's trying to bring color back in. And so this is one way she's drawing attention to the fact that there are more things out there you can do than just simply whites or off-whites or grays. And for instance, their loneliest color, which is Kingdom of Gold, she said you could also just do the color in an accent wall. It doesn't have to be the whole room. You could do textiles, prints, other sort of things to bring a pop of color in. But that was the whole mission around this campaign. Sherwin Williams is a $23.1 billion company.
Now, did you happen to do Dapper Dan? The minute you said Dapper Dan, I remember a documentary I saw recently about someone named Dapper Dan up in Harlem. Right. Happens to be a well-known fashion designer. He got his start in hip-hop. He's the person mostly responsible for remember when all of a sudden you would have these clothes with enormous like Gucci logos on them and
Right.
the Gucci logo on a chain and stuff. So he is like this super cool hip designer up in Harlem, and he just has a lot of fun with brand marks and color and stuff. So them turning Sherwin Williams going to Dapper Dan in Harlem is a really cool idea, in my opinion. I wonder what's going to come out of this.
Yeah, they showed some of the clothes. They're going to be auctioned off if they haven't been already. They said in mid-April that some of the clothes, there were pants, there were jackets that kind of had a plaid to them, but everything is done in this color, Kingdom of Gold is the palette he used. So I thought it was a smart idea. They brought attention to the fact that color, don't be afraid of color, but also kind of poked a little fun at themselves as well with this, their least selling color, and to highlight it with this marketing campaign. I thought it was a smart idea. So that's what.
And I think it was smart for them to turn to Dapper Dan. this guy who's kind of created that whole bold hip hop look.
Right. So, hey, many of you know we mentioned earlier that Deep Discount's a partner of ours here on the Focus Group. And you can get there by going to focusgroupradio.com, clicking on the Deep Discount logo, start shopping away. Right now, they've got something that I'm sure Mr. Nash is very excited about, animation for adults sale. So animation for adults, you get up to 50% off. There's lots of product to choose from at Deep Discount. Get there by going to our site, focusgroupradio.com. John, what did you find at the animation for adults sale?
I swear that Lauren was like, okay, this sale we're going to give to the focus group to promote because I know that John is. I don't you think she was like, oh, it's perfect for them because he's such an animation fan. Okay, so I picked a show that has been recommended to me multiple times by our friends Pat and Gary. They tend to have really good taste, especially with stuff that's wry humor and fun and sly. And it's a show called BoJack Horseman, Seasons 1 and 2, available on DVD for only $21.53. So it says here that the show is set in a Los Angeles in which humans and anthropomorphic animal people coexist. BoJack Horseman is an animated show about one man, parentheses, who is also a horse, who peaked early and is trying to figure out what to do with his life now. An outrageous and dark comedy with a melancholy center, the show asks the question, what happens when you have the world at your fingertips and you still can't figure out how to be happy? So my pick is BoJack Horseman Seasons 1 and 2 because I never got to see it. I did watch like an episode and I didn't get hooked in, but Pat always mentions this show, like, did you see BoJack? You know, so I have to watch it. I never
heard of it. Is it on one of the networks maybe too?
It might have been I want to say it might have been an MTV show
back in the day,
or a Cartoon Network. I'd have to look at that.
Like Daria used to be, or something.
Yeah, exactly,
or Daria. Yeah. I picked. I was poking around. Actually, the one movie I really wanted to pick in honor of you was The Triplets of Belleville, which
not
is
available.
About the Tour de France, and it's not available. But you can get it at deep discount, but not part of the sale. So, but it's a great movie. And I picked South Park season 6 through 10. Why, you may ask?
Why wouldn't you?
So there's 26 seasons of South Park. And so what I did, all 26 seasons are available. But they're obviously, you're not going to, it's in different chunks. So this particular set is 10 discs and it's seasons 6 through 10. So the reason I picked this one is because 4 of the top 10 seasons of all time are included in the 6 through 10. So I did a search to find out what are the best seasons of South Park. And in fact, season number 9, season 10 was number 6 of all time. Season 9 was number 10. I'm going to read this wrong. Number 10 was season 6. Number 9 was season 10. Number 8 was season 9, all included on this disc. And the number 1 season of all time is season 8, which is included in this disc. And it's everybody knows what South Park is about the kids and the 4 boys in the Colorado town. It's a scorching social commentary along with irreverent humor. And season 8 includes the Satanic Christmas Critters, which is known as one of their most popular, not only shows, but it's included in the season. So
you did your homework.
Seasons 6 through 10. Yeah, I did. And I went through each of the seasons. But so this particular 6 through 10 has the most of the top 10 seasons of all time for South Park. So if you're a South Park fan, by all means, collect all 26, but 6 through 10 would be the first one I would purchase.
Do you do what we do? Like, we are not consistent South Park watchers, but if it's on, we go there right away, especially if they're running 2 or 3 in a row. And I tell you, we howl with laughter and practically cry at what they get away with.
You can't believe, yeah. You just can't believe what they do. I mean, I had it on one day on the monitor, and I was going through, best of or whatever. And Richard's like, "What are you watching?" He's like, "I can't believe that's on TV." I'm like, yeah. They do get away with an awful, right? They're under the radar for some reason because it's a cartoon.
It's animated.
Probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, hilarious stuff.
All right, great pick. Excellent pick. And especially since you did the background information check on what are the top seasons, and this particular pack has 4 of them, right?
4 of the top 10, yep.
Yeah. We do have a new release this week, and it's from the people who brought you a movie that Bob was obsessed with, Megan. M3, Megan. Remember that it's that weird dance, this like little robot companion girl, and it turns into a horror film. So it's called Night Swim on Blu-ray, and it's the producers of Megan high dive into the deep end of horror with the supernatural thriller Night Swim. Wyatt Russell, the actor from The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, stars as a former Major League Baseball player forced into early retirement by a degenerative illness who moves into a new home with his wife, Oscar nominee Carrie Condon, and their 2 children. The new home comes complete with a backyard swimming pool, but a deep secret surfaces and unleashes a malevolent force that will drag the family into the inescapable depths of terror. So like, that pool's going to be a bad pool down there. So the new release is called Night Swim, and it's from the people who brought you that creepy movie. Bob, remember the Megan dance? That little girl, she did these, I remember
Bob that?
Well, he finally got to see the movie because he was obsessed with seeing the robot girl do the dance, so he saw that. All right, so just to recap, folks, it is a animation for adults sale. It's a wonderful sale. There's a lot of great things to choose from there. I picked BoJack Horseman seasons 1 and 2. It's a wry comedy where people and animals, or animals/people, interact in a fictional Hollywood. Highly recommended to me by friends who like this, so I have to check it out. Tim picked South Park seasons 6 through 10. This particular set has 4 of the top-rated or their fan favorite seasons of South Park, and frankly, anytime a South Park is on, I'm laughing because it's just off the wall. And the new release this week is called Night Swim, from the people who brought you that creepy movie about the little robot child called Megan. This time it's a family moving into a home, and there's something going on in that swimming pool. So remember to go to Deep Discount by going to focusgroupradio.com and clicking on the Deep Discount logo and start your shopping experience. We want to thank them for being a partner of ours here on the show. We're going to take a super quick break. When we come back, we have Business Birthday and a shop talk, which I think you'll find interesting, about selling it all and traveling the world. So stay with us.
You're listening to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com. Now back to The Focus Group with Tim and John. Available pretty much everywhere.
Hey, welcome back to The Focus Group. Tim Bennett here, as always, with my good friend and co-host, Mr. John T. Nash. Thanks for listening to us here on The Focus Group, as we say in our 16th year now. We appreciate all your support of us and your support of our partners. So head over to focusgroupradio.com to learn all about us. Without further ado, John, we've got our business birthday today.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but The Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
So our business birthday today is actually Mary Phelps Jacob, who changed her name to Caresse Crosby. She was born...
All right, wait. Go back to the original name, Mary.
Her name was Mary Phelps Jacob, which she was named after her mother. So because her name was Mary as well, they called her Polly. but she'd had a number of relationships, and her last husband decided she should change her name to Caresse Crosby. And she picked Caresse because the other name they were going to use was Clitoris. So her name was either going to be Clitoris Crosby or Caresse, which we'll get into in a minute.
You're not making that up, are you?
No. She's quite a gal. So she was born April 20th in 1892 in New York City. While her family was just a typical middle class, as you would call it, family at the time, they lived as if they weren't. So they lived as if they were really quite something. And her father had even presented her to the King of England, that did a big debutante ball and so forth. But they really were just what they said, a not fabulously rich. The father had been raised to ride hounds, sail boats, and lead cotillions, and live extravagantly, yet they never really had any money to do that. They would have garden parties. They would do all kinds of stuff, but they had no money, really. So...
even tea parties, garden, but they had no money.
But she grew up thinking that's how I want to live. So they actually had an estate of all things, John. So I don't know how poor they were. They had a place in Manhattan on 59th and 5th Avenue, and also an estate in Watertown, Connecticut. And so she was going to school there at the Miss Chapman School, which became Choate Rosemary. But she would hang out at Taft quite a bit, which you and I are both familiar with. And that's where her claim to fame came from in terms of what she's known for and what the business was she had. So as she was in Connecticut at one of these debutante balls in 1910, she was age 19, she had to get ready for the ball one evening. And as was customary, you would put on a corset, which you had to stiffen. And they would stiffen these corsets, they said, with whalebone, which were very restrictive. It was a tight covering, and it would flatten and jam your breasts up together. And they said the point of the corset was to cinch the waist in as tightly as possible, holding the women's torsos erect. And it was very difficult to feel comfortable when you were wearing these sort of garments. And she was putting on the same ball gown that she would worn when she did her debut to society a few weeks earlier. It was a sheer evening gown with a plunging neckline to display her cleavage. However, when she put this corset on, she just kept saying it felt like she was wearing armor. And she didn't like it. So she said to her personal maid, "Please bring me 2 pocket handkerchiefs and some pink ribbon, and also get me some needle and thread." And she made what we know now as the bra. And she put this, she fashioned these handkerchiefs over her boobies. No wire at the time. There were other bras that had very stiff wire, but she did this very simple ribbon bra. Cloth. So she goes to the debutante ball there at Taft, and everybody wants to know why she was able to move so freely and be so comfortable and move around. She showed them her bra. People were excited. They wanted them. She sold them for $1, and she realized it would become a viable business. So she patented the bra a few years later. She was the first bra patent in the U.S., and it was patented as a backless brassiere. Other people had done other types, they said, of brassieres as early as 1860. But hers, as we would know a bra today, was straps and as we would know the form of a bra today. Although this particular one didn't have an awful lot of support. She had shoulder straps, as I said, and you could also wear it low with a gown. So she started this company. Now, she left her first husband. So she meets this new husband, Harry Crosby, and he was very, very wealthy. And so she decided she was opening up a bra company in Boston, and she was going to start selling bras. She opened up a business and so forth. But he had so much money, he's like, "We don't want to do that. We want to have fun. Change your name." So she sold her patent and everything to a company called the Warner Brothers Corset Company in Bridgeport, Connecticut. So she decided to run off with this new guy, Harry Crosby, and she sells the bra for $1,500, which was the equivalent of like $27,000 in current dollars. So this company in Bridgeport, they manufactured the Crosby bra and ended up making $15 million over the patent over a few years, over 30 some years. They were getting royalty in every bra that was ever made. So they were, maybe as a penny a bra, whatever. But they made $15 million on this. She just got the $1,500. But she was living with this crazy Crosby guy. and he wanted her to change her name. And she says, she said later on, she thinks she may have made some mistakes along the way, but I can say that I can't say that the brassiere is ever going to take as great a place in history as, say, the steamboat, but I did invent it. And so then I watched this documentary about her, and this pretty much summed it up. So when she finds this Crosby guy, it says, and what a life she led. So they leave everything. They go to Paris. So her friends included Salvador Dali, Picasso, he did a painting of her, James Joyce, Ernest Hemingway, Cartier, bunch of people in the Beaux-Arts movement. And she would have this annual ball called the Caresse ball, where you had to arrive bare-chested. She would often show up in a turquoise wig riding an elephant. They founded a printing company called the Black Sun Press, and they would publish collections of love poetry and other things before expanding to include illustrations. They preferred to entertain guests in bed, she and her husband, dressed in magnificent dressing gowns. Their whippets, Narcissus and Clitoris, were between them. Her name was originally going to be changed to Clitoris, but they decided to use it for the dog instead. They would all be laying in bed, the dogs and her husband, Harry, and her, with gilded toenails and laden with jewelry. Champagne and caviar was served before everyone took off their clothes and had a communal bath. Then they smoked opium, had multiple affairs, traveled the world, wrote poetry, spent a lot of money like water, disregarding anything that resembled convention, and had a mad, extravagant life indeed. She left everything to Southern Illinois University. She had all her manuscripts and books, and there's a great documentary of her there in the 60s that they did interviewing her. But I thought, wow, what a gal. I don't know why no one's done a movie of her, she had relationships which were very taboo at the time, with women. She had relationships with black men. He had sex with women and men as well, her husband, but they were kind of these, I guess you would call them swingers now.
You don't guess, you would call them swingers. They were they went through the age, somehow they preserved their wealth through the stock market crash too, right?
Well, they said she called the banker when they decided to go to Paris after she sells the bra for $15,000.
Yeah.
And they decided, so her husband, who had a ton of money, but they said they just went to Paris with $10,000 and lived this extravagant life. Now, this, of course, is 1914, 1919, whatever it was.
Yeah. But
$10,000 bucks.
The intersection of the historical figures that you ran through, the Beaux-Arts movement, the writers, I don't think she probably did. You when you watched her being interviewed on the documentary, it sounds like there was zero regret for.
Oh no, she was sitting there, black dress, glass, laughing, and some of the persons, and everybody was being respectful to her, of course, and says, did Picasso ever do a portrait of you? I asked him. Then she's like, he was going to, and he drew a little something. And then she says, but Matisse did one. Let me see. She's ruffling through the papers. Oh, here's the one Matisse did. I like my lips. It was kind of
Matisse, which some of those works go for millions of dollars at all.
But, she goes, Picasso didn't really do portraits. At least that's what he told me. She was just very kind of, and they just said what a magnificent life she had. I'm surprised. Somebody did actually buy the rights to her story, apparently, in the early 2000s. They're trying to do this. This, of all the business birthdays I've done recently, had reams and reams and reams of information. Somebody I never heard of her.
No.
But she did, if you boil it all down, she invented the modern bra.
Yeah.
And of course, changed the course of many things. And particularly for women and comfort and all that stuff. But then when you look about her life in general, I'm not even touching the surface of things she did.
You're not even scratching the surface?
No. She was all over the place, and did a lot of good things as well. It certainly did a lot of philanthropic things that were well known. And
Caresse Crosby.
Yeah. And had many, many affairs, and they were very open about it. Her husband actually had an affair with this woman and left her in Chicago to go be with this younger woman. Then he came back to be with Caresse, and he decided that he really did want to be with this younger woman, and so she let him go, and they ended up killing themselves. Her husband and this woman decided that since they really couldn't leave their partners, maybe they should just die together, and they both shot themselves in the head and were found in the bed at a hotel in New York City.
What? That's a whole thing by itself, right?
Yes.
That's a whole wow.
And she let him come back home. He came back home, and then he said, I really can't do this. I really do love whatever her name was. I don't have it off the top of my head. She's like, well, then I'll go be with her. And then they got there, and they decided this wasn't the thing. It was called a suicide. They had a suicide pact, they said. And the police found them, and they did say she was shot a little sooner than he was. So, although they called it a murder-suicide.
Double suicide, yeah.
Yeah. So, happy birthday, Caresse.
That's a
Caresse
fantastic
Crosby.
business birthday. Thank you for finding that. That's amazing.
But somebody we should pay attention to, I think, in terms of one of these things, if a documentary comes out, because as I said, I didn't even scratch the surface. She had quite the time.
Quite the life.
Quite the life. So Mr. Nash had found this story here. And
For Shop Talk.
For Shop Talk. And so it's how two gay guys sold everything, left home to travel the world, and found happiness. So this couple named Michael and Brent, who were both writers of novels and screenplays. In 2016, they had a nice house in Seattle. They said, nice circle of friends, but they weren't especially happy. And when they boiled it all down, they said that what they realized that living in America didn't make them happy when they realized, and they put all their pieces together, because they felt every aspect of American culture encourages people to be busy, anxious, and lonely. So they decided they were going to sell their house and travel the world and go visit and live in a few different countries and decide if there was one they'd like to settle down in. And they said they were able to do this because, particularly with the pandemic, people found out that maybe you can be more remote than we ever thought we could be before. And so they became, which we now know of, which was coined the phrase digital nomads, meaning they travel around and do this sort of adventure. I have two friends that that had just done this, and in Seattle too, both from Seattle.
Yes, and they're happy to return to the U.S.
They found they went places just like this couple, and they loved every place. They met wonderful people. They loved everything. At the end of the day, they thought New York City was best.
I love the concept behind this. The two guys, because they're writers, they could do their work remotely, as Tim said earlier. It took them about a year to get everything downsized. I'm assuming that they sold the house, sold many of their belongings, but they did put things in storage for the future,
right.
Maybe. I mean, you can't imagine you got rid of everything. They had a very simple thing on the road, because they traveled very lightly and they basically had all their possessions with them. If you bought something new, something old had to go. So, that rang a bell for me. I like that. They had no problem making friends. They made many acquaintances, and they would reconnect with people in different countries because they would stay in touch with these people through WhatsApp and other methodologies. As long as a country had internet or a destination, they were able to do their jobs. They still had some of their career ups and downs that they experienced here in the U.S., like a manuscript wouldn't sell or a project would fizzle out and die. It just felt different this time because they were maybe in Valencia, or they were in Barcelona, or they're in Switzerland or Macedonia. They began their entire trip on the island of Malta, which I think is super cool. I would love to visit Malta someday. And from what I gather in this article, they're still on the road. In fact, this is an excerpt from a book that they plan on releasing, or will be released very shortly, about the two of them doing this. I think it's amazing. I think it's cool. One thing that I kept coming back to is, are they both in perfect health?
They must be, right?
Because if you are dealing with a condition and you need medications, are you traveling with those medications? Do you have a way of accessing them in other countries?
Well, I wondered about that. Somebody must be collecting mail, right, or forwarding something, because you still have to do your taxes because you're still Americans, right? Just as a simple thing. I had two schools of thought on this. My thought of doing something like this was always, and you and I have done this basically, I wanted to drive cross country.
Yep.
Which you and I essentially did. We went from New York City or Philadelphia we hit California, but we ended up in
Vegas. Yeah.
So we essentially did drive cross country, and it was a fun trip, but we were on a time constraint. We needed to be at a certain place at a certain time, and we had our trip mapped out. But I always thought it would be interesting to do it without a time frame.
Yeah.
To drive cross country and maybe take a detour here and there. Or if you found a place you particularly liked, or an area you wanted to explore more, you could stay. For instance, when we were in South Dakota, I had no idea South Dakota was going to be so nice.
Oh my
In
God, it was
terms
so
of
cool. Yeah.
the geography or whatever. And when I lived in Minnesota, I could have easily have done that. I just never stupidly paid attention to it. So that's the only thing I always thought of. I've never thought of this romance of me just picking up and going around the world. I don't have that desire. I wondered if Bob came home one day and said, you know what, John, we're both still in good health. Why don't we for a year, put things in storage. We'll sublet our apartment and our condo, and we'll travel throughout Europe and Asia. What would you say?
I'd be generally up for that idea, but just what you said a moment ago, you literally outlined some complexities that would really make this kind of hard. The responsibility of owning real estate, a home or an apartment, right?
Because they sold their place, didn't they?
They sold their
Seattle
place? House. Yeah,
so that's the money they probably lived on.
They probably, yeah, and obviously they probably had some savings as well. And they claim that being in other countries was incredibly cheaper than being in the U.S. And
right.
I've experienced that when I was in Spain and not London. If you go to London, you'll be like, wait a minute, it's even more money than New York or right. San Francisco or California. Whenever I've taken my cycling trips, my structured trips, the country that I've done the most riding in is Spain. And that's the one that I could actually tell you I would happily be able to live in, I think. I wonder if the language barrier would become a problem after a while because my Spanish is non-existent. My French is okay. They did touch on something that we haven't mentioned yet, which is the LGBTQ experience in different countries. And they did say in the article that what they learned about being gay in America versus gay on the road was that somehow, I'm looking for the exact line here. They said that Americans are, here it is. We've also met local LGBTQ plus men and women. It's sometimes upsetting learning how different countries treat sexual minorities. And we've definitely had an education on just how shockingly privileged Americans are. And we'll be writing about that too. Now, they didn't go into that further,
right.
But point of fact is that there are many countries that are not. They're either I don't want to say they play like a don't ask, don't tell with LGBTQ, or there are outright laws against it that you could get ensnared in. Now, I'm guessing these guys kept their American passports.
Right.
And that they're American citizens just traveling around the world. So, that passport, I remember once in Europe, someone looked at my passport and said, the golden ticket. And I said, what do you mean? They said, you're an American citizen. No one screws around with Americans. Who knows if that's true or not, but I tend to think that there's something about being from our country that makes that transition a little bit easier. I don't know.
Yeah, I could see where if you were in a country that one of the things they reference here, Macedonia, which I think is probably a Muslim majority, which may be a very, and I know people who have been there, but that might be a place where you'd want to be careful.
Yeah.
Just because of the religious background of what it means to be LGBTQ. I had mixed feelings about this because I thought as you did. I had a good friend that he's worked globally. And his partner, all for it. They want to leave the U.S. and do this, do that. And he pulled me aside privately and said, he said, I don't have a problem if we go somewhere, leave the U.S. but he said, I want to live somewhere where English is the first language.
Primary, yeah.
And I said, why? And he just shook his head. He said, I've lived in South America and I've lived in places in Europe where I don't speak the language. And yes, it's fun and you're in a nice little neighborhood and you go to the store. He said, but at the end of the day, if you need to go to the pharmacy, you need to go to the doctor, you need to go to the dentist. He goes, the language is a problem. If you don't speak,
it's a barrier.
If you don't speak the language, it becomes a harder place to be. As a tourist, he says it's one thing because generally, if you're in tourist areas somewhere, a lot of people do know English. But his whole thing was, I don't want to go somewhere where I just, at my age, feel I just cannot communicate.
You bring up an excellent point. One year back in 2009, I think Bob and I rented an apartment in Paris. in Rue-le-Pic, which is near Moulin Rouge, the original Moulin Rouge, and it's by Sacré-Cœur, which is called the Whitechapel. It's a high point in Paris. And we had a delightful time, but I have to be honest with you that by the end of the 5th or 6th day, I was fried. Whatever French I had was being put to the test, and it was this game of pantomime sometimes, and parlez-vous anglais, oui, un peu, a little bit, and you kind of like do this pidgin English to get to what you wanted. And even Bob, like when we took Eurorail to London to visit friends, and when we got to England and he could speak English again, he was like, he was thrilled to be able to just talk in our language. And that's a great point you bring up in your friend who's traveled or worked globally. I think this touches a lot of things that I think are just really cool. And depending on where you're at in the time stream age-wise, this could be something you would want to do. I'm fascinated by it to a large degree, but at the end of the day, if I were traveling around the world, I'd want my bike with me. So now you have a 17-pound thing that has to be transported expensively, right? It's in a case, the whole bit. Maybe I'm just too stuck in my ways. That's probably it,
No, but I think there's another way. For me, there would be a way I would do it where if I said, I wouldn't go now because it's too popular. Everyone talks about the hotspot of Asheville, North Carolina.
Yes. Yeah.
But if someone said, let's go live there for 2 months and see what it's like. You don't have to buy anything, but you can go there for 2 months and see what it's like and rent an Airbnb at length or a house with a short-term rental. Or you could do that in maybe somewhere in South, if you wanted to do Key West, or do something like that, change your footprint for a little while. In the U.S., it would be interesting to do because there's certainly a lot of places you could go that I would try. I would like to try Boise, Idaho for a month.
Yeah. How about Oklahoma City? When you and I were going to Oklahoma, we were totally surprised by what we found. We're like, wow, this is that's what you were referring to if you were doing the cross-country trip again. I would have loved to have spent 2 or 3 days in some of these places, like South Dakota,
very friendly,
Oklahoma City.
which you and I had our preconceived idea what Oklahoma City was going to be like. Based upon politics of their senators and what we see and what we hear from the pundits here on TV, but probably some of the nicest people we met along the way at the restaurants, the hotels. It really was a surprise for us, and I enjoyed that. But it was the same thing with other areas. I would have liked to, as I mentioned, South Dakota. You and I were shocked about how we thought Boise was a pretty cool hip town.
Super cool.
And if we could have spent maybe an extra half day there and gone out to lunch at one of the restaurants downtown or something to just experience it more. I don't think we spent enough time in Montana. I think that would have been, we got there late because of the Beartooth Pass. But
Bob at the wheel.
Yeah. I thought about that the other day. Of all people, right? The worst driver of the three of us, we put him on that. I was petrified in the back. Or no, I was up front.
You were clinging.
I
to
knew
the
it was
handle.
a problem. I knew it was a problem when you were like, you tap your finger a little bit, looking out, like, looking over the side, no guardrails. And Bob trying to be Superman with that car. Yeah.
He claims that we were just like babies.
I was petrified. I'm afraid of heights. And you're not even afraid of heights. And so I'm thinking, John will be fine. John's cool as a cucumber here. You're the baby when we're going to run out of gas and, we're on the main highway. I'm the baby when we're in these high places and you're like, they hang out the helicopter. So
this one scared me, though. And then totally true to Tim, we're like a third of the way down this super high mountain, this twisty, windy road called the Beartooth Pass. It was Bear Claw or Beartooth Pass?
Yeah, Beartooth Pass.
Tim goes, this is a pre-production model. I wonder if the brakes are good.
Yeah. Usually you put the crap on those. Yeah, we were in a pre-pro. I thought, man, if these brakes give, we're toast. Bob, hit the
That was
side.
a nail. I was biting my nails till we got to that hotel, and then when we had our Manhattan at dinner, then we all breathed a sigh of relief.
Well,
Bob
we were
was
also
fine.
just beat. Yeah.
Bob was totally like, you're little chickens, is what you are. Anyway,
that's Bob.
We're going to wrap it up there, folks. We want to thank you for joining us here on the Focus Group. A big thanks to our partner, Deep Discount. As we mentioned in their segment, they have an animation for adults sale. I picked BoJack Horseman seasons 1 and 2. Tim picked South Park seasons 6 through 10, which has 4 of one of their fan favorite seasons. And the new release this week was Night Swim on Blu-ray from the team that brought you that creepy little girl movie about the Megan doll thing. So we want to remind people, I know Bob loved that. We want to remind you don't text and drive, arrive alive. Have a great week, and we'll see you in the new one.
It's The Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.